Way back in 490 BC, on this little coastal plain in Greece, one of the most important battles in all of history was about to go down. And this was so much more than just a clash of armies. It was really a clash of civilizations. The fate of things we take for granted, democracy, philosophy, what we now call Western culture, it was all hanging by a thread. This is the incredible story of the Battle of Marathon.
And that really gets us to the heart of it, the almost unbelievable question at the center of this whole thing. On one side, you have the gigantic Persian Empire, and on the other, the brand new, kind of fragile democracy of Athens. To really get what happened, we first have to wrap our heads around just how much of a long shot this was.
I mean, just look at these numbers. They're wild. The Persian Empire had something like 35 million people, and it stretched across most of the known world at the time. Athens? Well, it was a single city, maybe 140,000 people total. This was the definition of a David versus Goliath showdown. So you gotta ask, why was the world's biggest superpower so dead set on crushing this one tiny city?
Well, the whole story really kicks off with a rebellion. You see, the Persian Empire was huge, but it was also kind of new. And let's just say not everyone who had been conquered was thrilled about it.
So, about 10 years before our main event, a bunch of Greek cities over in Ionia, that's modern-day Turkey, decided they'd had enough and rose up against their Persian rulers. Most of Greece wanted nothing to do with it, but Athens, along with another city called Eretria, decided to send a little help, about 25 ships. This small force actually helped the rebels march inland and burn a major Persian city, Sardis, to the ground. And, well, that act of defiance was not going to be forgotten. For the Persian king, Darius the Great, this was deeply personal.
And we get this incredible little detail from the ancient historian Herodotus that really shows you Darius's state of mind. He tells us the king was so furious, he actually ordered a servant to stand before him at every single dinner and say 3 words, "Master, remember the Athenians." This wasn't just foreign policy anymore, it was a personal vendetta.
And that vendetta finally arrived in 490 BC. After completely destroying the city of Eretria, the Persian fleet sailed south. They landed at a spot called Marathon, and they chose it for a very specific reason. It was wide and flat, absolutely perfect for the empire's deadliest weapon, its cavalry.
So the Persians land on the beach at Marathon. Now that's only 40 kilometers, about 26 miles away from Athens itself. And here's the kicker. At the time, Athens had no walls, nothing to protect its people. The threat wasn't just on the horizon, it was right at their doorstep.
The Athenians, of course, were scrambling. They marched their entire army out to block the road. At the same time, they sent their fastest runner, a guy named Pheidippides, on a grueling 220-kilometer run to Sparta to beg for help. But the reply that came back was just devastating. The Spartans said they couldn't help because of a religious festival. So for days, the small Athenian army, with just a few allies from a tiny city called Plataea, stood totally alone, locked in this terrifying stare-down with a force that massively outnumbered them.
Now, tactically, the two armies couldn't have been more different. You had the Greek hoplite, who was basically a walking tank, covered head to toe in bronze, carrying a huge shield and fighting with a long spear in a tight formation. The Persian infantryman, on the other hand, was built for speed and numbers. He wore light armor, and his main goal was to rain down arrows from a distance before charging in. So, you see, if it came to a head-on, close-quarters fight, the Greeks had a huge advantage.
But attacking a much bigger army, especially on a plain that was perfect for their cavalry, seemed like absolute suicide. The standoff was finally broken by what has to be one of the riskiest gambles in all of military history.
You see, the Athenian generals were split. Half of them wanted to play it safe and wait for the Spartans. The other half, led by a general named Miltiades, argued that waiting was just a slow death. Miltiades knew this enemy, he knew the terrain, and he managed to convince the overall commander to cast the deciding vote. The decision was made. They were going to attack. But why now?
Well, Miltiades' gamble wasn't just a whim. It was based on a key piece of intelligence. It seems that the one thing the Athenians were truly terrified of, that powerful Persian cavalry, was, for some reason, not on the field. Historians still debate why. Maybe they were being loaded back onto the ships for a direct attack on Athens. But whatever the reason, Miltiades knew. This was it. This was their one and only shot.
And the plan Miltiades came up with? It was pure genius. Okay, so look at this. He deliberately made his center weak, making it look like an easy target to draw the Persians in.
The goal was to let that center line bend, but not break. While the best Persian troops pushed forward into this trap, the heavily reinforced Greek wings would smash their opponents and then turn inwards, completely surrounding the enemy. But the key to the whole thing was that they had to run, a dead sprint, across the open field to get in close before those Persian archers could cut them to pieces.
And it worked. It worked perfectly. The battle was a brutal, up-close fight. And when it was all over, the number of Athenian casualties was just staggering. Only 192 citizen soldiers were lost.
Now compare that to the Persian losses. According to Herodotus, 6,400 of their soldiers were killed, either on the battlefield or in the chaos as they tried to get back to their ships. It wasn't just a victory, it was an absolute rout.
The victory at Marathon sent shockwaves across the ancient world, but its real importance, its true legacy, would echo for thousands of years, literally shaping the course of our history.
But wait, the fight wasn't actually over. As the defeated Persians scrambled back onto their ships, their commanders realized they had one last ace to play. The entire Athenian army was 40 kilometers away, which meant the city of Athens was completely defenseless. So the Persian fleet immediately set sail, aiming to swing around the coast and capture the city before the army could possibly get back.
What happened next is just a testament to pure human endurance. Those victorious but completely exhausted Athenian soldiers, still wearing all that heavy bronze armor, immediately turned around and force-marched the entire 40 kilometers back home, and they arrived just as the Persian ships were appearing off the coast. Imagine the shock of the Persian commanders, seeing the very same army they thought they'd left behind, now defending the city. They just gave up and sailed for home.
And this is where history and legend get a little tangled. A story that became popular later on tells of a runner, maybe that same guy, Pheidippides, sprinting all the way from the battlefield to Athens to deliver the news. He supposedly gasped out one word, "Ninakemen, we have won," and then collapsed and died on the spot.
Now, that incredible legend, which is probably a mix of the run to Sparta and the army's epic march back to Athens, had an unbelievable afterlife. It directly inspired the creation of the marathon race for the very first modern Olympic Games, right there in Athens in 1896. So yeah, the race we all know today was born from this ancient story of victory.
So when you boil it all down, why do we still talk about this one battle? Well, for one, it completely shattered the idea that the Persian Empire was invincible. It gave Athens this incredible shot of confidence that allowed it to lead Greece into its golden age. That's the era that gave us the Parthenon, Socrates, Plato, the whole shebang. Really, it was a victory for the very idea that a small state of free citizens could stand up to a massive empire and win.
And if you ever want to know what this victory truly meant to the people who were actually there, just look at the great playwright Aeschylus. He was a veteran of the battle, and when he died, his epitaph didn't mention any of his world-famous plays. Nope, it mentioned just one thing, that he had fought at Marathon. That was the thing he was most proud of.
So I'll leave you with this thought. Just imagine how different our world might be if that desperate gamble on the plains of Marathon had failed. Would the Golden Age of Athens have ever happened? Would democracy have even survived past its infancy? It's a pretty powerful question, and it reminds us just how much of our world was forged in the heat and dust of that one incredible day.